Hello, everybody. We're back at the Youth Centered podcast. It has been a very busy summer, a summer like no other. Pandemic 2020. We have been doing our podcast up all the way until we started our summer programs, and unfortunately, just did not have enough time in the day to continue the podcast during the heat of the summer and all the great things we were doing. But we are back at it right now, and we're going to be back every week with a new topic, new guests. Today, we're going to start off a new year of podcast talking about the amazing effort we all did in pulling off the greatest summer ever. Most people in town know that what took place this summer was pretty amazing, something that most people did not think was going to take place. And we've had some major success. We had 8 weeks of summer programming dealing with 819 kids, and we had 0 COVID-19 issues. So what we've been putting together is called the Blueprint. And the Blueprint has been a project put on at the end of our summer programs to document how we did this, to show some very important data to the powers that be, and to basically go on a speaking tour to communities that want to know how we did it, what took place, and obviously share all of our information to the state, to other fellow youth organizations that did not attempt to do programs this summer, as well as our own school system and our local school systems on some of our successes we had. So this podcast is entitled The Best Summer Ever, how we actually were able to pull off summer programs during a pandemic. And we're going to get started with basically how this started. So as everybody knows, we were moving along with a very normal school year operation here at the Youth Center. In the month of February, we did a great decision-making process where we picked our leaders for the summer this year, people that were going to be some of our site coordinators as well as our assistant coordinators. And we love the team we put together in February. A lot of new faces, a lot of people that have been around with us for a while, and we were excited. We had put together in February a full program that was going to model pretty much all of our summer programs that we'd done in the past, as well as breaking off into some new initiatives and some new things the kids wanted to see. And we had that project done. We had our plan done in February, and we're ready to go. We were basically, at that point in time, had our administrative team ready, and then we would start the process of hiring our high school and college kids, start the process of registration and marketing our programs, things that we have been doing now for 32 years. And then March 13th hit, where we were notified by the town manager that the youth center would be closing. And at that point in time, we, as along with everybody else, thought we'd be closing for probably 2 weeks. And our staff, who has been working very hard, kind of looked at it as like, well, might not be a bad idea having a couple of weeks to kind of rejuvenate and get the juices flowing, and we'll be back to what we think would be somewhat of a normal spring here at the youth center. And then, as everybody knows, the world kind of went out of whack. In 2 weeks turned into, probably a month, and then it wasn't too much longer that it was decided that there would be no more school for the rest of the year. And with no school and us following along kind of with the school schedule, and obviously the concerns with the global pandemic and COVID-19, we were closed up, and we started to work on so many other different things in town that were needed. We were very instrumental in procuring food for people, necessities that people needed. We were doing a lot with the social and emotional aspect of our kids that really did not know what was happening in the world. And that became our plan pretty much for the spring. And then it was probably at the end of March, I got a phone call from our administrative kids, and they were in a little bit of a panic, saying, so does this mean we won't have a job? Does this mean we won't be able to do anything during the summer? And I started to really think about, like, we need to figure out how we're going to navigate the unknown and navigate this COVID-19 global pandemic. And I personally began an initiative to try to convince people that we could look at having summer programs, albeit very different than we've known in the past. My immediate reaction I got from people were bewilderment, basically denial. This is not going to happen. It can't happen. We're in a global pandemic. We're not going to be having programs. There's no school. It doesn't look really bright. And, we're going to have to just ride this out and see where it goes. And from a personal standpoint, I found that unacceptable. I knew what we were dealing with, obviously something that none of us have ever dealt with in our life before, but also something that, the unknowns. We didn't know what we could do or what we couldn't do. So most people in my position and some of my peers throughout the state and southern New Hampshire took an approach of, let's just see what we're allowed to do. Let us know what we may or may not be able to do in the months of June, July, and August. I took a very different approach to that in terms of I wanted to have a plan like we would have summer, and then I would wait for the powers to be to probably dissect my plan and tell me what we can do and what we can't do out of that plan. My attitude was, at the end of the day, if the town manager and the town government said we couldn't do summer programs, at least I could look at myself in the mirror and look at other people and say, well, we at least tried to put something on. So my first initiative goal, after getting not a lot of support from even my closest personal friends, I met with my amazing full-time staff, Demi, Kyle, Lauren, and Asia, who actually started right at the start of the pandemic. And we got together and I told them what I was planning on doing. In typical fashion with my staff, probably looked at me like some of those other people, a little bewildered, and then kind of jumped on board and let's see if we can do this type of thing. So we initially started to think about, well, this is going to be overwhelming. We're going to have to bring in lots of help. And one of the first things that we did was we took those 16 college kids that were going to be our coordinators and assistant coordinators, and we created what was called the think tank. And we had a Zoom meeting, because remember, we lived totally by Zoom during the spring. And I looked at 16 faces on the screen along with my full-time staff, and I told them that we were having summer. And I needed them to help me make summer. And to this day, I wish I had a picture of that Zoom, because I had 16 college kids looking back at me with a lot of emotion. Is he crazy? Could we do this? Are we capable of doing this? Can we really have it? Because as I was asking them what they were hearing, they were obviously hearing from their parents and friends that it'll never happen, you can't do it. So before I finished the Zoom, I told them we were going to have summer and that they were going to actually help us put summer on. So we immediately started to meet weekly with the think tank, and we delegated a lot of duties. We started to say what were the things that we could do, what things couldn't we do. We looked at how we actually were going to change how we do business, going much more to a technological platform. Everything from registrations to, sign-ups. Pen and paper was not going to be part of our global plan during this global pandemic, So we actually had each group kind of designed to take a look at all different things that we could look at. It could be PPE information. It could be, how we were going to get kids to wear masks. And we met on a weekly basis from basically the first week in April until we started our program in June. And it's an amazing group of people. We had, as I said, all college people, but different age college people. We had, Gigi Castellanos, we had Ben Ramos, Lucy Kilcoyne, we had Nicole Kramer, Maggie Matolo, Nicole Sharp, Sabrina Freilich, Leah Hurley, we had Jude Stabile, we had Haley Fay, Matthew Samanek, Nate D'Entremont, Caitlin Wessel, Molly Malandrino, Kelly Murphy, and Drew Connolly. And each one of them were the people that we had called in February and said, you have a job. They never thought they were going to have to do all the planning for the job. And we can't say enough about what they actually accomplished. No was unacceptable for us. Our attitude was, let's shock the world, turn pessimism into optimism. And a lot of it was just by delegating responsibility and having faith and actually a commitment from them that they could do the things that I was asking them to do. We looked at it as a 9-inning baseball game. That was kind of our analogy. And we were starting out in the middle innings, and at that point we were losing in the game. And then throughout the course of the spring, we kind of went through that 9-inning game where we tried to close out what we were trying to do. So the creation of the think tank was probably one of the most important things that we did on this, and I can't tell you enough how much of a great job the think tank did, but also the fact that what they learned from this. They learned resiliency. They learned not accepting no for an answer, exhausting every alternatives down the road, and just an amazing group that worked with us throughout the summer. The next thing that we actually tried to do was we needed to know that there were other people that could actually help us, get this done. And I'm a strong believer in not having an ego. I'm a strong believer that you need to surround yourself with truth tellers, experts in their field. And I surrounded myself with anybody that I thought knew more than I did about COVID-19 in particular. I mean, I'm an expert putting on youth programs, and, my strength in that area is not questionable, but, try putting on summer programs in a global pandemic. So the first thing that we did was start to connect with our amazing health department, Director Brian LaGrasse, town nurse Carolyn Ibbotson, also school nurses Cheryl Barzak and Laura McDonald. And then my two superiors that I had to try to convince that this could happen, and that's our Deputy Town Manager, Dee Casey, and our amazing Town Manager, Melissa Rodriguez. And all I asked them to do was to not raise the white flag and tell me I couldn't do this. I needed their support to at least exhaust all possibilities of putting on a summer program. And again, that Zoom, there was no guarantees I could do this, and Melissa gave me unbelievable support. But at the end of the day said, as I expected, like, Rick, at the end of the day, we may not be able to do summer programs. And, that was all I needed to hear. I needed to hear that it wasn't a dead-end street, that it wasn't the end of the day, that we could at least explore that. So on top of that, I had a number of residents that were very supportive to me. Dr. Dave Samanek, our resident cardiologist for MGH, and a number of other professionals that worked in the nursing industry as well as any of the medical fields. And I would just periodically text them and say, do we think we could do this? What's your latest on this? And as everybody knows, information was unknown and information was changing all the time. But I wanted to know what was out there. So, obviously one of my suggestions to everybody is surround yourself with those experts that can help you do this. For us, everything was on the table. When we had these Zoom meetings with our think tank and our full-time staff, and periodically with the different experts we brought in, entertain any idea imaginable, then break it down to what was realistic and achievable. My attitude is when a crisis occurs, you must think of all the possible solutions, and there was no time for negativity. So one of the best things that we did right away with the think tank is, let's not feel bad for ourselves, let's not look at the negativity. Let's figure out at the end of the day what we can do and what we can't do. And that was our plan. We were charged by the town to come up with 3 plans. And the first plan would be, business as usual. If, for some reason the virus went away and we were back to, what summer was like in 2019. Very quickly, we titled that one, It's Way Past Midnight, because at that point in time where we were in the spring, it was not going to be a summer like we had ever known before. The second plan was the new normal, and that was going to be our plan, whatever we could come up with, researching everything around guidelines and safety and looking at doing activities different than we've ever done before. And then Plan 3, which I was not a favor of, but we were asked to put this, and we entitled it If All Else Fails. And If All Else Fails was basically going to regenerate what we had done in the spring with a lot of, virtual programming. And quite frankly, virtual program is short-lived. It's not something you can, do long-term. Virtual program tends to work more in the colder months. It worked really well for us in April and early May, but, it didn't work great when kids wanted to be outside in the beautiful weather. So my fear was if we couldn't get the new normal passed, we were going to have to do If All Else Fails, and that was going to be virtual, recreational programming, support programs, et cetera, et cetera. We took a look at it and we said we're going to evaluate each plan. So we put together, obviously, 3 really good plans. Remember, Plan 1 was already done. Plan 1 was done in February, so that was already done. The new normal was the one that was going to take us the most time. But we did spend a lot of time If All Else Fails, and that was not the most exciting plan to put together because that would pretty much tell us we weren't able to reach our goals, but at least we'd have something for the community. And then the attitude from us was to value each plan's possibilities, but to fight for the one that we really wanted. And obviously the one we really wanted was the new normal. So after we put together a very in-depth plan, a 24-page proposal to the town, which would be, again, those experts that I had talked to you about earlier, that we were going to have to sell this to. And that's obviously our town manager, our assistant town manager, our health department. And at that point in time, other people were brought in to, hear a little bit more, like Rick Galland from the school department, who actually runs his own programs, was brought in to see some of our successes and see if they could probably jump on that, as well as the fact that for all the years we've done this, we've never really had a health consultant. So we actually really needed to have some nurses on there that could actually be hired by us during the summer to help us through this. So the sell, the initial sell, obviously, to the town government was very lengthy. We went through the entire proposal. But before we did the how, we did the why. And I spent a good half hour to 40 minutes discussing the why. At the completion of me doing the why, town manager asked me how much coffee I had drinking that day because I had just been going 90 mile an hour about why we had to do it. And the why was basically 3-pronged. There was the issue that we needed to help parents get back to work. And if parents were going to have to go back into the work field, what were we going to do as a community to assist in child care, in daycare, and in my case, summer programs. And I basically did the sell in terms of that if we really are a community and we're going to work with each other, that we need to provide safe programs so parents could get back to some form of work in this global pandemic. The second one, and to me the most passionate for me, was to deliver the social and emotional aspect that was taking place with all age groups. Throughout the entire spring, I was working with guidance counselors from the elementary school, middle school personnel, high school personnel, and we were greatly, greatly concerned about what was going on with our kids. How are our kids handling, this new way of learning with the virtual learning? How were they, handling the fact of being cooped up in their house? How were they handling that they weren't with their friends? And I was very outspoken that we needed to address this because the problem was a big problem. And obviously the virus is scary. The virus is deadly. But not enough people were talking about the social and emotional aspects that were taking place. Once I started to be loud about it, I heard from even more people, parents, people that I actually work with, some of my peers in the field, saying we're seeing the same things. We have to fight for this. And as I started to talk about this, some of my peers, took the approach of, I applaud you, but I think I have to wait for what my town is going to let me do, what's the state going to let me do. And I cautioned them. I said, you need to come up with a plan, and at the end of the day, we may not be able to do the plan. But if they do allow you to do the plan, you're going to be scrambling at the last minute to put something out. So that was the second thing, was selling the whole social and emotional piece, which to this day, I am still worried about. I'm worried about it after the summer programs. I'm really worried about it as we're heading into the unknown of a new school year and what's going on with the virus. So the social emotional piece needed to be talked about a lot. And then the third piece was that I don't think enough people were talking about that if we didn't have safe, healthy programs during the summer that were supervised by people, the kids were going to just go out and do their own thing. And I was outspoken as someone who manages our fields and had to be around the community on an everyday basis during the spring. I saw what was happening. Packs of kids riding bicycles, nobody wearing masks, kids wrestling in the parks. And the reality is that if we weren't going to provide programs that followed guidelines and be safe, then it could be really kind of crazy during the summer here. So those are my three parts that I actually sold or tried to sell to the group that was going to allow me to do it or not allow me to do it. After that, I consider this the easy part, and I know a lot of people look at it the hard part, is, well, how are you going to do it? How are you going to be it safe? And, the reality is my think tank, my full-time staff, myself, we had spent hours upon hours figuring out how we were going to do this safely, all the way down from starting with, health screenings every single day and doing it electronically where people can do it on their computers or on their phones. And, procuring PPE. We were working with DCASE even before we got approval to the program of what we would need for PPE. We started to take a look at, how are you going to do social distancing? How are you going to actually sell a mask culture? And I don't think people thought that could happen at all. And I'll be fully honest, I was not a believer that, was all of our kids going to have to wear a mask? Did they have to actually wear a mask? I kind of had been convinced that my staff was probably going to have to wear masks. But we didn't really know too much about it. And then the whole feeling was you'll never get kids to wear masks. And although I thought it was going to be a challenge, I never once thought that we couldn't get kids to wear masks. But these were all of the things that we had to explain to the town about how we were going to do this. And after the meeting, the powers that be kind of gave us leverage to keep moving on. And that's all I wanted at that point. I wanted to be able to have a plan, a very safe plan. And then ultimately, we needed to see what the governor was going to say. We had to see what the guidelines were saying. And it was at that point in time, at the end of April, early May, where we first got some of the guidelines in terms of recreation and summer programs. But even those guidelines changed and didn't come out fully until even weeks before that we were about to start the program. So all I wanted was to sell and to be able to convince people on those three biggest issues. And I think that was the major sell in terms of convincing people that we could not just close up shop, take the summer off. We needed to do this. And as we continued, we worked together on a daily basis. My staff, one of the few municipal employee staffs that actually went back to work, and we had to, work staggered shifts, and we had to be obviously very careful of things in our own building. But we were back to work in mid-May because we needed to pull off this summer. There was definitely silver linings that took place in this whole process. We would sit around on Zoom or in actual meetings practicing social and physical distancing, and we would sit there and say, why haven't we done this before? And one of the best things that I believe is that technology is built for a pandemic. Some of the things that we're going to do forever now, I guess we should have been doing for years, just made us more efficient. It also had us new ways of thinking, new ways of operating a program. So we would not allow ourselves to, oh, we're not going to be able to do this. Oh, no, we're going to be able to do this. We looked at the possibility of delivering a possible better product than we had ever had before. And we actually knew we had always done things the right way, but we think we could have done it better. And I think throughout this entire process, we actually were able to prove that. And that's kind of the silver linings, and there were so many silver linings that came throughout the planning stage and throughout the summer, and still silver linings that are coming out right now. So then the next thing is, so even if we do get approval in the guidelines, how are you going to convince your community to buy into this? And we wanted to attack this early on. We weren't going to wait till the end. So we invited people to contact us. We talked to people. We had conversations. We had dialogues. We did some informal surveys. We used social media, incredible use of social media. We actually had some fun with it, with some crazy press conferences, and we did a lot of communication to people. And our attitude was, don't tell us no, tell us how. And we elicited a lot of parent feedback of what we could do and what we couldn't do. We were overwhelmed with how many parents wanted us to have summer programs. So as we got into mid-May, we were getting a ton of people emailing, calling us, seeing us on the street saying, you need to have it. Our kids need this. You got to help us. And there was a big time hope that, we could actually pull this off. So my belief in the community buy-in right from the beginning was to communicate, and communicate a lot, and communicate in a variety of different ways, and actually in a lot of unorthodox ways. And we did that with a lot of the social media. We needed to have clear expectations of state and municipal guidelines right from the beginning. And that changed, and it's still changing to this day. But what we would do is update people on where we were at this whole thing. When we made some final decisions that this was actually going to go, we told people black and white what was going to happen and what was not going to happen. And by doing that, I think the parents in this community became such an advocate for us. The advocacy that they did in voicing the support towards us was amazing. During this process, I had been meeting with my two board of directors, and I report, obviously, I work with the North Andover Youth Center Youth Council, and that is a group of adults, and we meet about 9 times a year, and they act as a supportive group to us in terms of, running the actual youth center. And I met with them and told them what I wanted to do. And my second group is more of the fundraising arm of the youth center, the Joseph N. Herman Youth Center, Inc. And like I said earlier with the think tank, I wish I had a picture of that Zoom where I had adults staring back at me saying, okay, you're going to do this? And I didn't give them an opportunity to say no. I basically said to them, I need your support. And as these two groups have always done for me, I'm not 100% sure they believed we could definitely do it, but they voiced their support. And then from there, it became a major push with the parents to get things done. And I think what we saw growing by the day. We saw people believing of what we could do and what we couldn't do. So when we got that okay from the town to do it, there were some things that were non-negotiable. So I had a lengthy meeting with the health department around masks. We were getting a lot of feedback from parents saying, our kids aren't going to be able to wear a mask. We prefer them not to wear a mask. And at the end of the day, the health department made a ruling that no mask, no entry into our program. So we were very clear to people on that. And there were a lot of people that probably worried them a little bit, but what they wanted was for their kids to be in a summer program bad enough that they would attempt this whole mask thing. So, one of the things we had to do in the late couple of weeks before we got started is we finally got the okay. So now we had to hire the staff. And this wasn't just hiring a regular, normal staff. This was, we have to hire more staff just because of all the COVID-19 guidelines that go along with it. So we were in a process after our think tank that we had to hire. Overall ends up being about another 120 kids during the summer. We normally hire 110 kids for the summer, but this year there was going to be a need for close to 150 kids. So we had to fast track that, and then we actually had to train them. And normally our training is anywhere from a 10 to 12 hour training, and it's usually a lot of fun and games and getting to know and team building. This year's training was intense. It was a lot of training around the COVID-19, a lot of the health issues. We were trained for 10 hours with our staff wearing masks the whole time. And at the end of the training, we talked about what was going to be our purpose. Is this something that you guys want to be part of? We had already decided that our slogan for the summer was being the difference, and we focused a big part of the training about that you have an opportunity to be the difference. We gave kids the opportunity at the end of the 10-hour training to opt out, and I would have not had an issue with anybody if they chose to opt out, because this was going to be a hard summer, harder than anybody's ever worked. And again, close to 60% of our kids were all going to be brand new staff kids that never even worked for us, and now we're going to ask them to work in a global pandemic. So we basically worked on that extensive guideline training, and our hope was that fear would become calm, and it actually did. Like at the end of the training, I think we all felt better. Again, we haven't even been with the kids yet, but I think we all felt like, I think we can do this, and I think we can definitely make this happen. And we brought in Jeff Deshane from the fire department and Lauren McDonald, who ended up being our nurse consultant for the summer. And I cannot talk enough about Lauren McDonald. Lauren McDonald was an absolute superhero and someone that saved us the entire summer. Demi and I and the rest of the staff, we don't pretend to be medical experts, although I'll put our knowledge up against anybody on guidelines right now. But Lauren came in and kind of calmed us down and talked to the kids and explained how we were going to do things. And again, our plan was all about, how you were going to put these cohorts together and how you were going to actually be able to monitor this and the health screenings and what happens if someone gets sick or someone shows some symptoms. And, again, I can't talk enough about what Lauren McDonald did to try to make this happen for us. And, we decided as a staff and me personally that we were going to try to inspire our staff every single day. Because we think we needed that. And whether it be a tweet or whether it be me coming to talk to the kids or, constant staff communication, and basically holding them accountable for what we needed to do with the guidelines, but never forgetting that they were going to be our superheroes and we were not going to be able to do this unless they could buy into everything we did with our culture and then work with all of these great kids. One of our big pushes was that this summer they had an opportunity to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And if you've ever worked with kids, you don't have to convince kids a lot of that. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And this was going to be something we've never done before. We were going to run programs during a global pandemic when nobody else thought we could do that. We also focused on that, my thing is I have a history of 32 years of working with kids that have gone on to do major, major things in their lives. But I also know that this summer, I believe, was going to be the greatest thing that my existing staff had ever done in their life. And we kind of put that on them that, this is going to be something. And our kids had the motivation of, I'm sick and tired of telling people that then we're not going to be able to do it. We're going to do it, and we're going to show them to do that. So after the training, we had to actually put together cohorts, and cohorts has become a name that everybody knows now. So basically the cohorts are small groups of kids that would be together throughout the day, throughout the week, and what ended up being great for us for almost throughout the whole summer. And we had to try to figure out how you make a cohort, right? So we asked the parents to give it, 2 or 3 names of kids that they would like their kid to be with. We also looked at shared interests, were they athletic, non-athletic, were they more into our chill station or our active stations or whatever. And I cannot give enough credit to my administrative staff that actually put together unbelievable cohorts. Now, remember, when we started, cohorts were going to be 10 kids, including the staff. And then Drummond itself, that would be 28 cohorts that we would actually be running. And it's, we have a 4.8 acre site, but it was kind of something that was very difficult for us to initially see how we were going to do this, all the way down to, what activities can you do with just 8 kids? And if 4 of those kids didn't come for one day for whatever reason, how were you going to actually do that? After the third week, or in the third week, we got great news, another silver lining, when the state allowed us to expand the cohorts. So instead of having 10, the cohorts could go up to 25, and our cohorts never went up to 25. We wanted to keep them a little bit smaller, but our cohorts ranged between 17 and 22 kids in a cohort, which was kind of group size that we'd always had pre-pandemic. So again, the first couple of weeks with having the smaller cohorts was difficult, but we absolutely rejoiced when the cohorts actually could expand. And what we found out with cohorts, another silver lining, is that the cohorts allowed relationships to get better. They allowed kids to be closer with each other. And it was pretty amazing. At Sargent Summer Fun, we're probably going to continue with cohorts past the pandemic. Drummond, with the kids a little bit older, or actually will probably have a version of the cohorts, and then also allow them to have the freedom to kind of move around a little bit if we get to the point where we're past with a vaccine or treatments, that we can actually kind of get back to a little bit of what we've done before. So the cohorts were put together, and on day one, my staff would have big poster boards with the number, and we had already told the people, what cohort number their kids are going to be in, and they came down, and that's how they first met their cohorts. And but the cohorts at even our middle school sites of Girl Gut Game and Sports and Rec ended up becoming like tight-knit groups. And for what we thought was going to be difficult with cohorts, and we thought that we might have to try to change cohorts, throughout the summer, we actually changed very few kids, especially at Sargent, Girl Gut Game, and Sports and Rec. We had very few changes. We had more changes at Drummond, but again, not what you would actually think about. We probably had about 20 changes throughout the summer, and the cohorts worked really well. And then obviously was the mask. Are these kids going to wear masks? Are they going to remember to wear their masks? What if they refuse to wear their masks? And basically, I had talked to my staff that it was going to come down to them. Like, they had to be, the models for this. They had to follow through wearing masks, and the kids would. And I remember at training, Lauren McDonald had a great line to the kids, and a lot of our staff chose to wear more of like the handkerchief mask, and Lauren talked about that they're going to idolize your staff so much that they're going to want to go out and wear the same masks as them. And that was so true. Right from week one, we saw kids wanting to wear a mask like Matt Samanek or Nate D'Entremont or Leah Hurley wear, and it was actually pretty cool. Masks were a little crazy the first couple of days. We just had to remind people a lot more. Had to remind my staff a little bit. And I would say by day 3, we started to see everybody grasping that. We had some kids that medically did not have to wear a mask, but they chose, and I'll never forget the one line from an amazing young man who I told privately, like, you have an exclusion to not wear a mask. And he looked at me, not even sure he knew really who I was, but he said, "No, we're all in this together." And that was the attitude. So when I hear teachers and educators and parents talk about you're never going to get kids to wear masks, let me tell you, stop talking about that. Masks is not the issue. We had kids at Sargent kindergarten, first and second grade. Now, I would suggest you make sure you have a child-size mask, because some of those kindergarten kids had kind of some adult masks, and we had to adjust to that a little bit. But everybody wore their mask. And one of the number of reasons that they wore the mask is they did not want to be cooped up. If it meant wearing a mask, they were going to wear a mask because they did not want to stay at home. And remember, we wore masks for 5 hours a day, 95-degree heat, crazy weather. Obviously we had mask breaks. Obviously, when you had socially distanced breaks, you could take your mask off. And obviously, when you were 6 feet apart, you didn't have to wear masks. So masks became a non-issue. And as we head into the school year, please stop talking about masks. It's not an issue. The best thing for our school department is a sample of 819 kids showed educators that they can wear masks. And you're going to have to, hold kids accountable. I'm sure there will be some high school kids that may forget their masks. Well, that's why we have extra PPE. You may have some kids that might try to push the limits and not wear their masks. Well, then they're not in the class. We're in a health emergency, and hold kids accountable, just like our staff held our kids accountable, and we held our staff accountable. It's a non-issue. As we kind of proceeded, it's really important to kind of talk about our community partners in making this happen. So again, we talk about our think tank. We talk about the experts we brought in. We talk about our full-time staff and the vision we had. But for us, it was also to have the support of our community partners. And that starts with our municipal community partners, with the health department, obviously the town manager's office. Other departments within the town hall were great in terms of helping us with PPE and, making sure we had all of the things that we needed to run a safe program. North Andover Fire Department, I can't speak enough about Jeff Deschaines and, the fire department for what they did, provided training, constant training, helped us actually procure AEDs for our mobile sites. Were there for any question we had with that. And then our school partners. Obviously, we end up using a couple of schools. So obviously school building principals at the middle school and the sergeant school, we could not have done without them. In the same breath, we couldn't have done without the custodians of those buildings who actually helped us and made sure that things were taken care of and that, we had the adequate space we needed. And then obviously the people behind the scenes that kept us going. And, we had some great local politicians who were big supporters of us. And the reality is our local businesses whom we supported, through our social media campaign throughout the spring, were huge in supporting what we wanted to do and what we could do. I've always believed that everyone wants to be part of a success story, and what we were doing was definitely going to be part of a success story. Social media was a huge thing for us. The daily posts of kids smiling in safe environments, following all the guidelines. We would do weekly, daily, heartfelt videos. I usually did 2 to 3 a week. Around, updates and, how we're going to do this and kind of putting a face to some of the things we were doing that. I think with all of that stuff, it was actually got the parents to, buy in and to see all the safe things we were doing. And who doesn't love to see their kids smiling? And we think they're smiling behind those masks, having a great time and being outside. And this is where our parents' support just grew and grew every single day. We also looked at technology again. We used our YouTube channel. So things that parents used to love to come to Lip Sync or the talent show or all the little different things we did with the kids. Well, this year we couldn't have parents on site. So what did we do? We videotaped it. We showed it on our YouTube channel, and everybody still got to see the same thing. So our social media was constant. I'm sorry if we tied up your timeline for 6 weeks or 8 weeks for some of our other programs. But it was about really showing you what we're doing. And I think that's the most amazing thing. I do need to let parents know that your constant support in terms of posts, comments, feedback on social media motivated us. We'll talk about a few people that weren't supportive of it, but most of the people, 95, 98% of people just were amazing and wanted us to succeed and wanted us to do this and knew how special it was, what we were trying to do. You would say all those great posts, but let's be honest, you also brought ice cream, you bought pizza, you bought, little things for my staff to kind of keep them going, and we will never forget the parents' support in what we tried to pull off this year. We also use our social media in other areas too, and after about week 2, I was getting a tremendous amount of phone calls saying, I'm hearing my son talk about this kid and his name, and we don't know who he is, and you really can't see him behind the mask, and he's wearing sunglasses or he has a baseball hat on. So we started this initiative called Superheroes Unmasked, and they truly were superheroes, and they've been wearing masks. So they were known as the masked superheroes throughout the summer. And then when we finished, we put on a great video which basically took the masks off each one of our staff, so you could, as parents, see the amazing group of 150 kids that supported your kids throughout the summer. And still to come, we have our Best Summer Ever video, which will be coming out in early September. And that's going to pretty much document, and we always call it the Best Summer Ever video. There's no doubt in mind what we pulled off this summer is definitely going to be the Best Summer Ever video. Some of my suggestions of rolling with the changes, and if you ever run youth programs, you can't be, just like this is the way it has to be. You have to be fluid. You have to allow for some changes. You have to adjust. You have to deal with the fact that kids' interests change on a minute-by-minute basis sometimes. But we had to roll with the changes because the changing guidelines changed literally every week. And as for people that are in the know, that are in the field, Friday afternoons I'd be hanging on my computer to truly, see if there's going to be any changes this week. Are we going to have any adjustments with it? And then obviously they could go either way, right? So things went really well, but they also could have went the other direction where maybe we would have even had to close up shop, but we didn't. So you needed to roll with the guidelines. Community people who don't know the guidelines. This was frustrating for us. And a little suggestion, some people that might have made some complaints or thought they saw something that they didn't really see. The guidelines are extensive. Most people don't even know what the guidelines are, never mind being able to interpret the guidelines. So, I had to deal with some frustration with, a few people making phone calls and saying, I saw this, and I said, it's not actually true. Our staff did a phenomenal job following the guidelines day by day, minute by minute. But, the reality is there were some people that were probably rooting for us to fail. I had heard even about a little pool going on in town where, when's the first kid going to get COVID-19 and shut down summer fun? And kind of disappointing to hear that because we're supposed to be all in this together, and I don't think, who would really want to do that. And then there were some people that there were great reasons why people shouldn't send their kid, and I value and I respect every parent that chose not to send their child because of their concern with COVID-19. But in the same breath, that's your choice. You cannot, criticize people for sending their kids. And, so there were a couple of cheap shots on that. But reality being is the complaints were less and less as each day went by. And, for every complaint we got, it actually ended up being about 30 compliments for every time we got, a concern or a complaint. We had to actually be prepared that other groups are not as safe as ours. And we had a local, camp at the high school that, obviously did not follow the guidelines properly. And we had a scare where 10 of our staff members needed to be quarantined. And obviously, I'm happy to say none of them were COVID-19 positive, but it was an impact on us. And it had us change and had to hire some more people or whatever. But I do think that incident in itself was a silver lining in terms of high school kids who actually thought the only people that really got COVID-19 were people Rick's age or people in nursing homes or things like that. And I think it kind of really shook up our high school kids and our college kids saying, we got to watch what we're doing, after work and on the weekends, whether it's barbecues or the beach or whatever like that, because, if you don't follow the guidelines, it could affect a program. And, there were some other local programs that had to be shut down because they didn't follow the guidelines. And obviously we can control the controllables, and we need to control what we can do. And we did that for 5 hours a day. But after that incident at the high school, I had to take a look at really addressing with the kids the other 19 hours a day that they were living, where they were sleeping 9 hours, what's the other 10 hours, and just trying to appeal to them that, they need to practice all the guidelines. We're doing the 5 hours that we're at camp, and I'm so proud of what they did. Weather was unbelievable this summer. We always have hot weather, don't get me wrong, but we had probably the most 90-degree weather days. We had some funky weather. One day it wasn't even supposed to rain till the afternoon, and we get this thunder and lightning storm. And obviously, when you deal with a pandemic, it's different on how you can use indoor space. But we rolled with everything this summer, and it was really good to see the last couple of weeks. We kind of lucked out on the weather. Days it was supposed to rain, it didn't rain, and everything like that. So it's New England. We got to roll with it. One of our best things that we really embrace here is kind of embracing the weather, and how do we make the weather have fun with us. I know up at Sports and Rec, they love when there's showers and stuff like that, and it doesn't stop them in what they're doing. So we had an unbelievable plan in terms of, what happens if someone has COVID-19. And obviously, I'm extremely proud to be one of the few programs in the entire state that ran 8 weeks that had 0 COVID-19 cases. But we had a plan for that. And I tell people, and I've told educators, we need to stop thinking the attitude of preventing COVID-19, but more dealing with it when it happens. Like, we are going to have cases of COVID-19. The key is how you handle it. How is the cohort, quarantine? Who gets quarantined? How long do they get quarantined for? Identifying the groups. After the incident that took place with the other program, we did a quick, test on how fast we could provide information if someone was COVID-19 positive, and we showed really quickly that we could provide all the information necessary for any medical authority in 7 minutes, and that goes to the plan that we had. We looked at a lot of, like, you had to have a COVID-19 room, and we come up with different names for it, but we didn't want to stigmatize it to that. So, we had ways of, making sure that if anyone had to use that room, waiting for a ride, it'd be all set, everything would be sanitized, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm happy to say after 14,000 health screenings, we did not have one COVID-19 issue. The reality is we had some close cases, and it was usually affected from outside the program, like I had just mentioned. But we had a couple of unfortunate situations where a sibling was possibly COVID-19, and 2 of them ended up being negative, which was great. And you really understood, who has to be quarantined in terms of contacts. Is it a direct contact? Is it a contact removed by twice or 3 times? And then we unfortunately had a situation where a staff member's sister was positive, and he himself had to be quarantined for the last 2 weeks of camp. But obviously the kids didn't have to be quarantined because, they never had any contact with the sister, and the young man actually was negative anyways. But we took every precaution on that. Understanding how to use space, and we're doing it with the reopening of the youth center, just understanding how we can actually use space properly. And it's not as difficult as everybody thinks it is. You just got to be creative. And we're going to be creative, and we were creative all summer. Most people think, oh, well, Rick just ran an outdoor program. That is not correct. We ran an outside program 65% of the time, and 35% we were in the building, using it correctly, the gymnasium and, the upstairs and how we use that. So it's just a matter of being creative in how you use that state and really understanding what physical distancing is. So, the school has a tough job ahead of them, and I know that they're going to do a great job in dealing with this. But we need to start realizing, like, how are we going to do things, not that we can't do anything. Parent concerns, a lot of the times, parents just need a sympathetic ear. They need to be told what is up. They need to be told, literally, how you're going to run things, what happens with this. And I think one of the big things we had the fewest amount of complaints about is I think parents knew exactly what they were getting into by signing up in our program. And again, unlike an education setting, this is a volunteer program. You don't have to come to it. But I know we had 819 kids that chose to do it, and I know we had close to 300 that after we got started actually wanted to be part of when they felt a little more comfortable with it. So one of my things is, before everybody thinks that parents are just complaining or whining or something like that, well, they're just looking for some answers. And I think the key for us was just communication, communication, communication. And we probably did it almost too much. And if we did, I apologize. But the reality is parents need to know. We needed to empower our staff. And for us, the biggest success of why we were able to pull this off is we include them in planning. We gave them specific roles based on their skill set. We allowed them to be decision makers, which is extremely important. We allowed them to carry the torch with our culture. And as I've said many, many times on this podcast, the Youth Center's culture is second to none. I believe there's a number of other organizations that have good cultures, and I'll give a shout out to Steve Nugent's track program at the high school. But at the end of the day, the culture that we do here is amazing. It's carried on for decades, and allowing the staff to carry the torch with the culture instead of just Rick Gorman doing that is huge. Allow them to make mistakes, and remember, a pandemic is messy. No one's ever lived through a pandemic before, and there were going to be problems. So to get, upset at staff constantly or whatever, we were learning as much as everybody was learning. Celebrate the growth in the leadership, and I'm telling you, I am so proud of every kid that worked for me. I am so proud of that think tank, but I'm proud of those newest workers who started out as 16-year-old kids trying to just think they're going to get a job at Summer Fun playing with kids and have to follow all these guidelines and came out with flying colors. So you got to celebrate that. As I said, constant communication and feedback. You have to do that. You have to allow people to give you some feedback. And I'm not sensitive to this. If there were things that we could do better, I wanted to hear it. And some of the complaints we did get were things that I did take into consideration and took a look at. How you do it is the key, though. Daily accountability. We had to send kids home or have parents sit in the parking lot and fill out the health screening. It's accountable. No kid was coming on our site. No staff was coming on our site unless they filled out that health screening. We had to send a couple of staff members home throughout the summer till they did the health screening and then come back. But you got to hold them the accountability. Weekly debriefs and problem solving. My think tank group, we met every Friday. We kind of digested what was good, what was bad, where we needed to get better, and allowing them to be part of this problem solving thing was great. Always show appreciation and gratitude, and I think I personally do a really good job with that. I think our staff does. I think our parents, big shout out. What you guys did this summer for my staff, I can't even put a price tag about just showing your appreciation the way you did. And you know what it was like on the last day. Last days are the most emotional days, but when you see parents, crying, you see parents with their cars decorated, when you see parents, basically the common theme was the Youth Center saved summer. And your appreciation kept us going every day. I needed to take the hits, so my staff didn't. I had a young staff, and, I was not going to tell my staff every time I got an email with a person making a false complaint about something or whatever. And that's just what you got to do, I guess, when you sit in the first chair, is you got to take some hits so your staff doesn't. I needed them to stay positive. I needed them to believe what they were doing was amazing. You got to believe in the people you put in the positions of authority. I think we did a great job picking our people in authority, and you just got to back them up. And remember, they're just, in a lot of ways, they're just kids. They're learning, and they're going to be so stronger and better for everything they did. And I always believe this. In a global pandemic, it's messy. Things get screwed up a little bit. Things may not go as flawless as you did. But before you correct those kids, and I live my life by this, I've never yelled at a kid unless that kid knows that I love them. And I think they need to know that you care about them, and then they'll take that feedback and do the best with it. So, we empowered that line staff. So, you take away that think tank and you take those other 122 or so staff people. We recognized their accomplishments. We shared with them the emails. When the wonderful woman wrote a poem about our counselors, we read it to our counselors. Anytime we got a great email, anytime there was an email from somebody, I would bring the kid in and say, this was written about you. One of the best stories I got was a parent that read an email that wanted to wait till the end of the summer but feel they couldn't because she was just emotional. It was Friday night. Her daughter had her first softball game, And in the field walks her two favorite counselors who, on their own personal time, Emma and Claudia, they made it down to the softball field, and it was the greatest thing for this girl, and I think it was the greatest thing for the parents. So I called each of them on Saturday morning. I think they thought they were in trouble, and I kind of told them what these parents said. So these were the things that got my staff and helped them keep going, and we encouraged them to look at the social media posts, and we just tried to keep them up to date with that. We put each staff person in a position to succeed, and that's all you can ask to do. And well done, mission completed. We actually did put people in a position to succeed. And then again, hold them accountable, like I had said earlier. Documenting everything. That was a huge part of what we did this summer. The entire summer, Pandemic 2020, was data-driven. We had to make sure on the daily health screening for participants, the daily health screening for the staff. We had to actually defeat the myth that kids can't wear masks, and we had to document on that, and it would blow people's minds away of how few issues we had with kids with masks. We obviously had to document anything to do with the COVID-19 guidelines and any instance that came up with that. We had to collaborate with our medical team on a daily basis, and that's the nurses as well as Brian and Carolyn at the health department. And, again, another shout out to Lauren McDonald. Couldn't have done it without her. Holding area for anyone who gets sick, and we wanted to make sure it wasn't stigmatized. Like if a kid wasn't feeling well, we even had kids like, oh, do you think he has or she has COVID-19? And we had to really deal with the stigmatization with that. And, just making sure we had every, T crossed and every I dotted on all of these things. Constant ability to provide cohort tracking information. This was the thing I told you. In 7 minutes, we were actually able to show a test that we did on this. The reality is you needed to track where the kids were at, who they were with. Now, again, kids are with every people outside of the 5 hours, but during the 5 hours, we could track exactly where all of these cohorts were. Observations. My entire summer was observations, watching, seeing what we are doing, documenting everything, giving feedback. And again, we learned an awful lot about running a summer program in a global pandemic. Daily check-in with our participants, and I talked to the kids. Many times I had to talk to the kids, and when the word got out to some of our younger kids that some of our kids were quarantined, I had to meet with those kids. I had to actually talk to some parents because there was some fear around that. So, obviously checking in with our participants in terms of how you're handling the mask. What are we doing on this hot day here? And we'd have to adjust activities. Obviously taking a look at our whole attendance reports. Who's not coming? Is there a reason why they're not coming? Are they just going to the beach or on a vacation? These were all things that we tracked completely. Early releases. Why is a kid being released early? Is he not feeling well? Is he just going to the beach early? But these are all things that we were actually able to document throughout the summer. And then it came down to, as we got to each day getting closer and closer, it became we were going to do this. And when we finished those last 2 days at all the sites and how emotional those sites were, their parents and the kids, and I can't tell you enough about the tears that were spilled in North Andover over those last 2 days. We finally all looked at each other and we said, we did it. And that was the whole thing. Nice story up at Sports and Rec between a couple of my staff people. When the last whistle sounded, just two guys looked at each other and just said the same thing. They said it together. They said, we really did it. And yes, they really did do it. So, when it was over, we debriefed the entire summer. What worked, what didn't, what would we do differently? Who knows? We may still be in, coronavirus, global pandemic next summer. I'm hoping we're not. But, if we were, how would we continue to run safe programs? We celebrated all the victories, no matter how small or how big. We looked at that silver linings thing that I've mentioned a lot. We talked. We wrote down and said, these are going to be our new norms. These are things we should have done probably before a pandemic. We spent time showing gratitude to all those that made our dream come true and the kids' dream come true. We took the high road with the haters, the non-believers, and the scared. And that's what a lot of it was. People were scared, and people are still scared. But by the end of my day is that, we are in this together. We should be supporting each other, and it's not my job to call out the people that, were the haters of the program. I just think that they're going to look at this a little bit different now of what we actually did and what we were actually able to combat. We got feedback on every guideline we had to follow, because I want to give the powers that be some feedback on actually the state guidelines. I mean, the state would love to hear all of our thoughts and our data that we've provided this summer, because I think at the end of the day, we need to even look at how we're even doing the guidelines. Should the guidelines be even a little bit more different than they are? We spent 80% of our summer outdoors and 65% on some days. And the reality is that we really got this done. And, to be able to put together this binder, this 100-page binder of the summer, is the most amazing thing. And, and then from there, we kind of wrapped up the summer, and it was time to kind of take a bow. And, I first want to thank those experts, those people that were the people that were going to allow me to have this program and not allow me to have this program, starting with our town manager all the way down. A shout out to our town manager, Melissa Rodriguez. I have been one of the few people in town that has worked for every town manager North Andover has ever had. And I think I've had a great relationship with all of them, but they were all very different. I'm not sure how many town managers would be built for a global pandemic. I think some would have taken a different style and probably not let me do this. There is a few others that have higher personalities that may have micromanage me as much. Melissa basically said, I trust you. At the end of the day, I might have the final decision, and I might say, no, Rick, but go with it. I love your passion. I love what you're trying to do. And along with D. Casey, they kind of gave us the okay to do that. And then, working with what I consider the best health department in the state right now, what they did. And then, obviously I've mentioned Lauren McDonald, Cheryl Barzak, Carolyn Ibbenson, the nurses, what they did for us was amazing. And then, we had to really kind of thank all of the people, starting with the parents that really believed in us and made this happen. So, and then I did something that I've never done before, extremely time consuming. I'm having one-on-one meetings with 150 of the kids that worked for me this summer. And I am literally down to the final 10. But I wanted to personally thank every single one of them for what they did in making this the best summer ever. I wanted to thank them and use the parents' line of, you saved summer. And I actually know that they did save summer, and we'll always look at it that way. I'm getting great feedback from them on their resiliency and what they want to do, and it's interesting. And at the end of the day, we have a hybrid method at the school department. But if you talk to 150 kids that work for me, they believe in going back to school full time because they think it can be done. And obviously, school's a little bit different than summer programs, but I love the passion that they want to be back in there, and they want to show people what we did and how we did it. So I actually don't have much more to say about those kids, except everyone in the town of North Andover owes these kids a debt of gratitude. I also want to shout out the 819 kids. This was summer that they've never had before. They had to follow very strict guidelines. They had to be involved with a program that was different than how they remember it. And the first timers, this is probably how they think summer fun's run all the time, but the reality here was each one of those kids, it was hot wearing a mask. It was hard following the guidelines, but you guys were troopers. And when I saw you all get into the cars, and I know how much you guys miss my staff already, and you miss coming back to our programs, and I want to thank you, 819 special young people there. And I think the school department gets a little bit of help on this also, in terms of each one of those 819 kids is used to wearing a mask. They're used to following guidelines. I think they're going to be really good at the schools they go back to on that. So this has been a little bit of a blueprint about how we did it. To wrap this up, I've been fortunate in my 32 years here to be involved with some amazing things that have happened in this town. When I think back of some of the real sad things we've had, when we had our adolescent seventh grade suicide cluster back in the 90s, when we dealt with a lot of teen deaths in the 90s and early 2000s, and then some of the amazing things that we have been able to accomplish, like building this department from a one-man, one-truck operation to the agency it is now, and obviously our town building this youth center, and the field aspects I've been involved with, and the new fields were built, and building Stevens Pond, all wonderful things that I can say I've been really part of. But I do want to say this summer was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it was the greatest thing I've done in my life. If anything, that I have a legacy when I do leave here, helping to put on summer programs during a global pandemic, this was the thing I'm most proud of. When you look at the youth center and you look at bricks and mortars, and it's a beautiful building, but at the end of the day, our kids in North Andover, our families needed this summer, and I'm proud to lead this group of staff of 150 kids and 5 full-time people to pull off the greatest summer ever. So once again, North Andover, you showed how you step up to stuff. You show how you support the kids in town, and this is why, even after 32 years, I'm extremely proud to be the director of the North Andover Youth and Recreation Services. And I do hope that in 2021, we can get back to a little bit more normalcy with our summer program. But if we can't, be fully understood that we will be putting on a summer program, and we will do whatever it takes to make it a safe program for our kids. And I want to finish by just saying, you need to continue to watch the social and emotional aspect of our kids, from our little kindergarten kids all the way up through our college kids. This is not an easy time for them, because remember, it's not an easy time for us as adults. But we need to continue to do whatever we can to do to help kids in particular to get through these rough times. And, as we always say this, North Andover, we're in this together. Let's continue to work together to keep this a safe environment for our kids and continue to make this the great town that we are. So, again, I thank you all. And as we finish every podcast, we always say, too much passion is never enough passion.